The question we're going to begin with tonight is it a mitzvah to believe in God? That is actually a complicated question. Now, HaRambam certainly believed that it is. He states this explicitly right at the beginning of his Sefer HaMitzvot and reiterates this at the beginning of his Mishneh Torah. The biblical source for this mitzvah is none other than the first of the 10 commandments, as is recorded in this week's Perashat. Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher hotzeiticha me'eretz Mitzrayim. I am the Lord your God. Shortly after his unequivocal presentation in the Mishneh Torah, HaRambam invokes a powerful verse from the book of Devarim. I want to read it to you. V'yadata hayom v'Chovot HaLevavot ki Hashem hu ha'Elohim b'shamayim mimal ve'al ha'aretz mitachat en od. The pasuk says, "Know therefore this day and take to heart that the Lord is God in heaven above and on earth below. There is none other than Hashem." It seems that this verse is ratifying the biblical source for such a commandment. So what is so complicated about this? Isn't it obvious that it is a positive mitzvah to believe in God? The answer is no. Ramban, Nachmanides, appears to be conflicted on this issue. In his commentary on the first verse of the 10 Commandments, he seems to state explicitly that indeed, Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher hotzeiticha me'eretz Mitzrayim, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt, is a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to know and believe that God is God, and God has taken the Jewish people out of Egypt and shined his providence upon the Jewish people. In his glosses on HaRambam's Sefer HaMitzvot, however, Nachmanides seems to argue that Anochi, the first of the 10 Commandments, is not a mitzvah. It's not a commandment, but rather a statement of fact. Now, the truth is, I would not read much into this last comment, this gloss of Nachmanides, if it wasn't for a comment made by one of the great early luminaries referred to as Baal Halachot Gedolot, who was very influential in Europe, even though he emerged from Bavel, Iraq. For him, belief in God cannot be commanded. Anochi is a statement of fact, a kind of grand proclamation of faith in God and in revelation, a sort of self-identification where Hashem declares his special relationship with the Jewish people. I just want to be clear. He does not suggest that Jews do not have to believe in God. Of course, a Jew must believe wholeheartedly in God. He questions, however, how can the law be authoritative without first establishing the belief and authority of the author of the law? The belief in the lawgiver must precede the law itself and cannot be legislated as a law. This idea that belief in God is not a mitzvah was fairly popular in Ashkenaz, Europe. The late 14th century northern Spanish philosopher Hasdai Crescas developed this idea further by suggesting that it is unreasonable to command belief and faith without explaining who God is. For him, belief in Hashem is a precondition to accepting the Torah law. One might even argue that God commanding belief in himself is a form of brainwashing and indoctrination. Since one would be expected to believe in God, before having any prior knowledge of God. And so Crescas concludes, and he states blatantly that HaRambam must be wrong in codifying belief in God. This argument is not at all the position of HaRambam and the schools of thought in Andalusia. In fact, the great thinker, Bachya Ibn Pakuda, one of the great Chachamim of Al-Andalus, argues, no. Commanding belief in God is not brainwashing and is in fact what the Torah insists upon. He writes as follows in his Chovot HaLevavot, his book called Duties of the Heart. Number one, he claims that Torah unapologetically maintains certain beliefs and creeds that are essential in observing some of the most fundamental Jewish practices. Number two, he argues that it would be absurd for Hashem to issue commandments that involved one's hands, such as putting on tefillin, feet, such as making aliyah l'regel, pilgrimages to Jerusalem, our mouths, where we recite prayers, our ears, such as hearing the shofar, our stomachs, eating matzah, and not our minds. Our mind is the noblest of all our organs. Of course, we must believe in God. Ibn Pakuda and HaRambam maintain that it is a mitzvah to believe in God. There are numerous mitzvot associated with the mind and inner spirit of the human being, such as love and awe of God, love of your fellow Jew, not to be jealous or kavet, and many more. The mitzvah to believe in God, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, is a mitzvah that requires work and study and exploration and reflection. HaRambam and Ibn Pakuda and all the schools of Jewish thought in southern Spain taught that God is not only concerned with what we want or what we feel or do, but God is also concerned with what we believe and how our lives are a reflection of that belief. Like HaRambam, Ibn Pakuda insists that it is not enough to repeat what others have said about belief or accept belief in God on the authority of others, but rather one must seek to understand the nature and scope of belief in God. If belief, emunah in Hashem, is indeed a mitzvah, then it is within everyone's power to fulfill the commandment. Thank you very much. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.